Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling a topic that's pretty fundamental to software development, manual testing.
Yeah, you got it.
So, we're talking about the hands-on approach where a real person, sits down at the computer and actually interacts with the software, clicks those buttons, navigates those menus.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about experiencing the software like a user would, and that's what makes it so important for understanding, how well it actually works, how usable it is.
Makes sense. And we have a ton of articles and research actually on this topic,
Yeah.
specifically about the challenges of manual testing and how to, overcome some of those hurdles.
Right, because let's face it, even though it's essential, it's not always easy.
Oh, yeah.
There are definitely some common pitfalls that testers run into.
For sure. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today.
Yeah.
Those tricky areas like dealing with repetitive tasks, struggling with tight deadlines, and even, those pesky human errors that we all make.
We're all human.
Exactly. So are you ready to jump in and get our hands dirty with this topic?
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
All right. So let's start with something that I think we can all relate to. Repetition.
Ugh.
Right. So picture this. You're testing a new feature and you're clicking the same buttons. You're filling out the same forms over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's like Groundhog Day for software testers.
It can get super mind-numbing.
Absolutely. And that's actually where the danger lies. When testing becomes too repetitive, it's really easy for a tester to zone out,
Yeah, they get burnt out.
Exactly, get burnt out. And when a tester's burnt out, well, they're a lot more likely to miss those sneaky little bugs.
And that's the last thing we want.
Yeah, that's bad news.
Yeah. So how do we escape this repetition trap?
Yeah.
What strategies have you come across in the research that can help with this?
Well, one surprisingly effective strategy is using checklists.
Checklists? Really?
I know it sounds really basic, but honestly, they can be a total game changer.
So how do checklists help with this?
Well, think of a checklist as like a recipe for testing success. It helps you break down those complex tasks into smaller, more manageable steps. And that way you're less likely to miss anything crucial.
Like a step-by-step guide.
Exactly. And plus checking things off a list, it's actually kind of satisfying. It gives you that sense of progress and helps to combat that feeling of monotony.
So it's like a psychological boost too.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now, what about automating some of these tasks? Would that free up testers to focus on the more interesting aspects of testing?
Oh, absolutely. Automation is a really powerful tool, but you have to use it strategically.
Okay.
The research suggests that selectively automating certain tests, like regression tests, that can be a great way to boost efficiency without sacrificing the human element.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between, the human intuition and the power of automation.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've talked about repetition. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about another major challenge, time.
Oh, yeah, the ever-ticking clock.
Software teams are constantly under pressure, right, to deliver high-quality products faster than ever before.
And with shorter and shorter deadlines.
Yeah, and I can only imagine how stressful it can be for testers, when those deadlines are looming and that to-do list just seems to be growing exponentially.
Yeah, it's a real pressure cooker environment. And, it can lead to testers cutting corners or rushing through tests just to try and meet those deadlines.
Right, just trying to get it done.
Yeah. But as one of the articles pointed out, skipping tests or not giving them enough attention is kind of like building a house with half the nails, You might get it done quickly, but it's not going to be structurally sound in the long run.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid falling into this time trap? What are some practical strategies that testers can use to be both thorough and efficient?
Well, prioritization is absolutely key. Imagine you're a battlefield commander. You have to assess the situation. You have to focus your resources on the areas that pose the highest risk, right? And the same principle applies to testing. Testers need to carefully evaluate which test cases are the most critical and really focus their efforts there. And that might mean, using risk-based testing techniques or focusing on areas that have a history of bugs, where those problems tend to crop up.
So it's about working smarter, not just harder.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another technique that comes up a lot in the research is time boxing.
Time boxing.
Yeah. Have you tried that approach?
I can't say I have. What is that?
It's pretty simple. You set a specific amount of time for testing a particular module or feature. You say, okay, we've got 30 minutes to put this login system through its paces.
So you're kind of creating that sense of urgency.
Yeah, and focus, so you're not getting bogged down in one area for too long.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about repetition. We're talking about time. And even with the best planning and prioritization, there's one challenge that we can't really ignore: human error.
Yeah, it's the elephant in the room, isn't it?
We're all human. We all make mistakes. But in software testing, a missed step or an overlooked bug can have some pretty serious consequences.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So what kind of impact are we talking about here? Give me an example.
Well, one anecdote from the research really stuck with me. It was about a seemingly minor typo in a software update, and it slipped through testing, and it ended up causing a system crash that affected thousands of users.
Wow.
Just one tiny error, but the impact was huge.
Yeah, that's a great example, and it really highlights the need for us to be vigilant, even when we're dealing with seemingly small details.
Absolutely.
So what strategies can we use to minimize that risk of human error, in the testing process?
Well, having clear, detailed test cases can make a huge difference. Think of a test case as a step-by-step guide. It tells you exactly how to test it, what the expected outcome should be.
Okay.
And having that kind of detailed roadmap can greatly reduce the chances of making a mistake or missing something important.
It's like having that GPS for your testing journey, right? Keeps you on track.
Yeah.
Prevents you from taking those wrong turns.
Exactly. And another powerful tool in the fight against human error is peer review. Having a fresh set of eyes look over your work can often catch those sneaky errors that you might have missed.
Yeah, because sometimes you're just so close to it, you can't see the forest for the trees.
Exactly. And it's amazing what you can spot when you're not the one who wrote the code or designed the test case.
Right. So you're getting that outside perspective.
Exactly.
Now let's shift gears again and talk about another challenge that testers often face. Have you ever felt like you're trying to map the entire universe when you're testing a complex application?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
I mean, there are just so many different scenarios, inputs, user actions. It can feel completely overwhelming.
Absolutely.
And that's the challenge of limited test coverage, right?
Exactly. It's virtually impossible to test every single possibility, and that means there's always a risk that a critical bug could be lurking in an untested area just waiting to strike.
Waiting to rear its ugly head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we navigate this vast testing landscape, without getting completely lost? What strategies can we use to prioritize and make the most of our testing efforts?
Yeah, how do we do that?
Well, one technique that comes up a lot in the research is equivalence partitioning.
Equivalence partitioning, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's a way to strategically reduce the number of test cases while still covering a wide range of scenarios.
Okay, can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So imagine you're testing a field where users can enter their age.
Okay.
Instead of testing every single possible age from, 0 to 100 and whatever.
Right, would be there forever.
Exactly. You can group those ages into what are called equivalence classes.
Okay.
So, for example, you might have a class for ages 0 to 17, another for 18 to 64, another for 65 and up,
Okay, follow you.
And you only need to test one value from each class to get a good idea of how the system handles those different age inputs.
So it's about identifying those key representative values and making sure that they work as expected.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And then there's another technique called boundary value analysis, which focuses on testing the edges of those equivalence classes.
Okay.
So, for example, you would want to test ages 0, 17, 18, 64, and 65 to make sure the system handles those boundary cases correctly.
So equivalence partitioning helps us kind of narrow down the scope, and then boundary value analysis helps us make sure that we're not missing any of those critical edge cases.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. But what about those scenarios that are hard to predict or define in a structured way? What about those things that we just don't anticipate?
That's where exploratory testing comes in.
Okay.
It's all about embracing that spirit of exploration, using your intuition and experience to kind of poke and prod the software in unexpected ways,
Yeah, go off script a little bit.
Exactly. You never know what you might find.
It's like part detective work, part creative problem solving.
Exactly.
Like that. Now let's switch gears again and talk about something that might seem a little less glamorous, but it's absolutely essential for effective testing. Documentation.
Ugh, paperwork.
I know, but it's important.
It is.
And I'm sure you've had those moments where you're testing and you make this brilliant observation, but you forget to write it down. And then later, it's like trying to remember a dream.
Oh, yeah, it's so frustrating.
It's like the worst.
It's like a detective forgetting to take notes at a crime scene,
Yeah, exactly.
Those seemingly insignificant details can become crucial later on.
Right. And without proper documentation, replicating tests and tracking progress, it just becomes a nightmare.
Oh, yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
So how do we avoid falling into the documentation black hole?
Yeah.
What are some practical tips for keeping track of our testing insights and our progress?
Well, the research really emphasizes the importance of real-time note-taking.
Okay.
Simple spreadsheets or dedicated testing tools can be lifesavers for capturing those fleeting insights, as you're testing. And don't underestimate the power of good old-fashioned pen and paper.
Oh, yeah, pen and paper. Sometimes it's just easier to jot things down quickly.
Yeah.
But what about those big picture summaries? How do we make sure that we're capturing the key takeaways from each testing session?
Yeah, well, post-session summaries are essential.
Okay.
Think of them like a detective's case report, detailing the key findings, the steps that were taken, any issues or bugs that were uncovered,
Okay.
And these summaries, they provide a valuable record for future reference and can really help inform those future testing efforts.
So it's not just about, recording what happened. It's about creating that shared understanding and having a historical record.
Exactly.
Okay, now imagine you're facing this mountain of testing tasks and your application keeps growing and growing.
Oh, yeah, it's like that snowball effect.
That's the challenge of scaling manual testing, right?
It is, and it can quickly turn into an avalanche if you're not careful.
And we all know what happens when an avalanche hits. Delays, missed bugs, and a whole lot of stress.
Exactly, and that's where things can get really tricky. But what's interesting is that our sources actually offer some practical advice for handling this scaling dilemma.
Okay,
Well, one approach is to break down testing into smaller, more manageable chunks. It's that old adage, divide and conquer.
Yeah, break it down, make it bite-sized.
Exactly.
Right, it's like tackling a giant puzzle, one piece at a time. But what about the situations where manual testing just isn't enough? To keep up with the pace of development.
Yeah.
Have you found any suggestions for those scenarios?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When things start to get really complex, it can be super helpful to combine manual and automated testing.
Okay.
Think of it as a dynamic duo. Machines can handle those repetitive, large-scale tasks, which frees up the human testers to focus on the areas that require more, creativity, intuition, and a deeper understanding of the user experience.
Right. So it's not about replacing humans with robots.
Yeah.
It's about finding that synergy, between human intelligence and machine efficiency.
Exactly. Each brings their own strengths to the table,
For sure. Okay, now let's shift gears one more time and talk about a challenge that can really plague any team, not just software testers, communication gaps.
Oh, yeah. Communication is key.
It is. Have you ever experienced this in your work? I mean, I know I certainly have.
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, miscommunication can lead to all sorts of headaches, confusion, wasted effort, and sometimes even a bit of finger pointing.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Not a recipe for a happier, productive team.
No, it's not.
So the research really emphasizes the importance of clear, consistent communication, between testers, developers, everyone involved in the project.
Right. Everybody needs to be on the same page.
Yeah, when everyone is on the same page about requirements, priorities progress, things just tend to run a lot smoother.
For sure.
So how do we bridge those communication gaps? What practical steps can we take to keep everyone in the loop, and prevent those frustrating, wait, what are we doing moments?
Well, collaboration platforms can be a real game changer. Tools like Jira, Slack, Confluence, those allow teams to share updates, ask questions, stay in sync in that virtual space. It's like having a central hub for all that project-related communication.
Yeah, I love those tools. They definitely saved me from a few communication meltdowns in the past. But what about good old-fashioned face-to-face interaction?
Yeah.
Is there still a place for that in today's, digital world?
Absolutely. Regular meetings, whether it's a quick daily stand-up or a more in-depth, weekly sprint review, those are crucial for keeping everyone on the same page and fostering that collaborative spirit,
Right.
It's a chance to connect on a personal level, clarify any misunderstandings, and make sure everyone is moving in the same direction.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, from the soul-crushing monotony of repetitive tasks to the importance of clear communication. It's clear that manual testing is full of challenges, but also incredibly important, for ensuring that high-quality software.
Absolutely.
So what stands out to you as the most important takeaway from all this? What do you want our listener to really remember?
Well, for me, it's the reminder that even though we have all these amazing tools and techniques at our disposal, manual testing, it ultimately comes down to the human element.
Right.
It's that human touch, that ability to step into the user's shoes and experience the software firsthand. That's what truly sets manual testing apart.
It's that empathy factor.
Exactly.
And it's also clear that overcoming these challenges isn't about finding some magic bullet. It's about adopting the right mindset, embracing that continuous learning journey and leveraging the right tools and strategies for each situation.
For sure. And it's important to remember that, even though we strive for perfection, we're all human, we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
The key is to learn from those mistakes, improve our processes, and keep pushing those boundaries of what's possible in software testing.
So true. The world of software development is constantly changing, which means testers need to be adaptable, curious, and always willing to learn new things. So what are some of the biggest testing challenges that you faced in your own work, and what creative solutions have you found?
Well, one challenge I've run into is dealing with those really complex systems, the ones where there are so many interconnected parts. It's like trying to untangle a giant knot.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
And it can be really tough to isolate issues and figure out, exactly what's causing a bug.
So how do you even approach testing something like that?
Well, one thing that's helped me is to break down the system into smaller, more manageable pieces,
Okay.
kind of like we talked about with scaling testing in general, divide and conquer.
Right.
But I also try to focus on those key integration points, those places where different parts of the system come together, because that's often where those tricky bugs tend to hide.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're kind of looking for those weak links in the chain. Okay, it sounds like you've learned a lot from those experiences, and that's what it's all about, right? Kind of continuous learning and improvement. So what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out, in the world of manual testing? What's the one thing that you wish you had known when you were first starting out?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing is to cultivate that deep sense of curiosity,
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask questions, experiment, explore different approaches to testing. The more you learn about the software, the better equipped you'll be to find those hidden bugs and ensure, a smooth user experience.
Curiosity is key. It's like being a detective, always searching for clues and piecing together the puzzle.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of building relationships with the developers and other stakeholders. The more you understand their perspectives and their workflows, the more effective you'll be as a tester.
It's all about collaboration.
Yeah.
It's not just about finding bugs. It's about working together to create the best possible product.
Well said.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, the importance of embracing that continuous learning journey. The world of software testing is constantly evolving, which means we need to stay ahead of the curve.
Absolutely.
So what are some resources or strategies, that you recommend for staying up to date with the latest trends and best practices?
Well, there are so many great resources out there, online communities, like the Ministry of Testing are fantastic for connecting with other testers, sharing knowledge, learning from each other's experiences,
Yeah, I love those online communities. They're so valuable.
Absolutely. And conferences, workshops, online courses, they can provide valuable insights into those emerging trends and advanced techniques.
And don't forget about the power of good old-fashioned reading. Books, blogs, industry publications, those can offer a wealth of knowledge and inspiration.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The key is to stay curious, keep learning, and never stop exploring, that fascinating world of software testing.
Couldn't agree more. Well said. So, as we reach the end of our deep dive into the world of manual testing, what's the one final thought that you want to leave our listeners with? What's that nugget of wisdom that they can take away and apply to their own testing journey?
I would say embrace the challenges.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty, experiment, make mistakes. That's how you learn and grow as a tester.
Right.
And remember, you're not alone in this journey.
Yeah.
There's a whole community of testers out there who are facing the same challenges and striving to create those amazing software experiences,
That's a great message to end on. Embrace the challenges, keep learning, and connect with the testing community. And speaking of learning, in our next deep dive, we're going to tackle a topic that's essential for every tester writing effective test cases.
Oh, that's a good one.
We'll explore best practices for creating those detailed step-by-step guides that ensure that no bug goes untested and no user experience is left unexamined.
It's going to be a fascinating exploration of how to craft those test cases that are clear, concise, and comprehensive. We'll delve into techniques for identifying those test scenarios, defining expected outcomes, and ensuring that your test cases are both effective and maintainable.
Sounds good. I can't wait to dive into that. Until then, keep those testing skills sharp, those minds curious, and those bugs on the run.
Happy testing.